It's time now for the news review of this bulletin. The German economy minister has accused the U.S. of charging too much for its gas deliveries, as Europe's biggest economy struggles to rebalance its energy mix without Russian supplies. Robert Habeck rapped Washington for achieving what he called astronomical prices amid Europe's energy crisis. The U.S. is now providing 45% of Europe's liquefied natural gas, in which the continent is investing to make up for the Russian cuts. Meanwhile, the EU says that it is ready to discuss a price cap on gas within the bloc to bring down soaring energy costs ahead of winter. That after over half of the 27-member bloc called for a price ceiling on gas imports. Russia has reduced its supplies to Europe in response to the West's crippling sanctions over the war in Ukraine. Jerome Hughes is a correspondent joining us from Brussels to give us the latest on this story. Greg Simmons is a researcher at the Institute for Russian and Eurasian Studies, who joins us from Uppsala over in Sweden. Welcome to you both. Jerome Hughes, first over to you. So how much money are the Americans making?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, or a lot more than $1 million anyway, Covey. I think this thing about price caps on energy and so on for citizens, it's sort of being used now as a smokescreen to take away from actually what's happening in the background, the real story. I mean, when all the dust settles on all of this and we get a true picture of how much the EU is paying for energy, I think it really will open a lot of eyes because, you know, it has to be paid back. We're talking about austerity measures here. Obviously, taxpayers will have to pay it back. So it'll be fascinating when we get all the details. What we do know is that last March, the EU signed a deal with the United States for the US to deliver liquefied natural gas, LNG, totaling at least 15 billion cubic meters before the end of this year. Now, is it going to be more? Is it going to be less? What exactly is the price of that? You have a situation whereby a lot of individual EU member states are buying energy from different countries, but then the European Commission, for example, with that deal with Washington, it's trying to coordinate things, but the overall cost is enormous, and as I said, it has to be paid back. So, you know, we haven't really seen the full picture yet. There's a lack of coordination, and what the experts are saying as well is that, you know, in 15 years from now, even if there wasn't this crisis happening now, the demand for fossil fuels, for oil and gas, it would have increased anyway. And this idea of sort of replacing everything with renewables overnight, it really takes a long time to do that. So that's not possible. You know, I mean, last winter, we had a mild winter in terms of wind energy. So the turbines weren't moving. It could happen again this winter. The turbines can't store the energy, so they only produce energy when they're running. Of course, we would all like to see renewable energy and climate change action. But, you know, not everyone can go out and buy an electric car for €30,000 or whatever. And what's the long-term plan? Because at the end of the day, you know, we're getting energy from Norway, from the United States, from Algeria, from, you know, United Arab Emirates, from Qatar, Egypt, and so on. But this is costing a fortune. It's costing an absolute fortune. And where's the long-term plan? That can't keep going on forever. But just let me finally, on this, give you one figure, Covey, if I can. Bruegel, which is the economic think tank, it's just a short distance from where I'm speaking to you from now. It estimated a few weeks ago, its experts said that the short-term cost of replacing Russia's cheap gas, the short-term cost, and that's in addition to what would have been spent anyway, is they estimated to be €100 billion.
Well, that kind of falls in line with how much they're paying right now. Greg Simmons, based on one source, is $56 million for just one container to be delivered to Europe, of which the U.S. then goes around and charges $256 million. So $200 million a pop for each delivery. Now, putting aside that cost or profit, the whole logic here is for this war to continue, led by the U.S. in many ways. Greg Simmons, do you have us?
Yes, I'm back now.
Okay, no problem. Well, the U.S. is leading this war. I guess in the past hour, Zelensky signed a decree that it's not going to opt for peace with Russia. So the Europeans would want some kind of relief coming from the U.S. that is providing this energy. But yet the U.S. is looking at it as a profit-making scheme. That shouldn't sit too well with the Europeans, as Germany has stated.
Well, I mean, you have a problem here because even before this war, even before the energy crisis, when you had this talk of substituting Russian gas, it was understood that the American energy would cost at least 4 times the price of Russian gas. Its quality is less, and its quantity cannot be guaranteed because you don't have pipelines. It has to be shipped across. So all of these things were known before the war. Of course, I mean, when you got Germany and these other states, which have essentially turned themselves from vassals to client states, what they've done is they've surrendered their energy security to the United States and made themselves hostage. And of course, now the European citizens are going to pay the price. And when this price is being paid and the full extent is known, they will definitely not be happy.
Jerome Hughes, taking a look at not only just Germany, but other European countries who are suffering, obviously, as a whole, from this energy, high energy costs. We're looking at reports have indicated a number of companies or factories to relocate actually to the U.S. What is the general sentiment when it comes to this whole thing with the energy and with factories that are unable to keep up production or are in jeopardy of closing down, which many have also closed down as a result of this? Jerome, we don't have your audio.
I'm sorry about that. You can hear me now?
Yes, we got you now.
I'm just sorry, Kobe. I'm just saying that there's a great deal of frustration because it's well known and it's been said in the European Parliament and by energy experts, the world is awash with energy. There's no doubt about that. But what we brought ourselves to a situation, you see the attacks on the Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 pipelines. It's obvious, even the greatest critics of Russia are saying that it's obvious the greatest beneficiary of this would be the United States. You've already given the figures yourself in terms of the LNG that's being brought into the EU from the US. And of course, that will have to continue because there's no long-term plan. And so, you know, you have a situation whereby the foreign policy all along has been to try and push down Russia, push down Iran. And, you know, Iran, for example, this has been said in the European Parliament as well, it could have been a fantastic supplier of energy to the EU because it has massive, massive reserves of energy. And yet, because the EU has blindly followed the United States, which of course leads NATO, effectively leads the EU, many say, because the EU has done this blindly, we're now in a situation where we're taking energy from all corners of the place. When we were getting very cheap gas from Russia, we're also getting coal, we're also getting oil, all sorts of other important items as well for food, like wheat. I know there's a lot of wheat comes from Ukraine, but also from Russia. And we see food prices, energy prices going through the roof. So actually, people are just wondering, why are we in this situation? Who actually is benefiting at the end of the day? Is it the arms industry? Is it the lobby groups that have a particular problem with Russia or a particular problem with Iran and also with China? Like, who is the beneficiary of all of this? Certainly not the EU citizens.
Yeah, well, Greg Simmons, that poses the question here as to why the Europeans are going down this path. I mean, Germany, who has complained now about this absolutely high prices being charged by the U.S., has said that if we're going to continue down this path, we're going to have social crises on our hands. We're going to have people protesting. I think they actually did. I think there were protests in Germany, actually, just in the past 24 hours. Yesterday, people in Germany came out and protested. We had them in Prague. It's going on in the UK, and I'm sure, and France. So this is what the Europeans are facing. When are they going to wake up and smell the coffee?
Well, I mean, as your correspondent said, I mean, the EU is not independent. I mean, it's absolutely dependent on Washington. They always have been. I mean, they've always aligned themselves with the geostrategic imperatives of the United States, even if it costs them and runs against their own interests. This is just the latest example. And yes, I mean, Germany, I mean, even last month, issued the statement. They said police will be patrolling streets in Germany to maintain order. In other words, to crush people's rightful to protest against this idiotic situation which has been imposed on them by Washington via their own people that theoretically represent them, but are doing everything which contradicts the interests of European citizens.
Thank you very much for that. Greg Simmons, researcher at the Institute for Russian and Eurasian Studies. Jerome Hughes, a pleasure to see you, correspondent there from Brussels. And with that, we come to an end for this news review. Thanks for tuning in.